Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today because I was lucky to be born in the Canary Islands, Tenerife. And the same way that the kings of Spain years ago make a bet in Christopher Columbus to explore new opportunities and innovate and make people believe that the earth is curved and not just plain. It's a little bit of the story that I would like to tell you. A story about exploring, a story about innovation, and how everything goes back. I feel like I'm a very lucky guy because I was born here and I have a wonderful childhood. I was able to go to the beach, I was able to explore the Teide and all the beautiful things that we get in the Canary Islands. And I remember when I was a kid and I was studying molecular biology here in the University of La Laguna, I used to carry my big books, jeans, molecular biology, to the beach and open them. And people would look at me saying, "You're not studying, I mean, come on." But you know what? That was the way that my brain was expanding. I felt I was like a sponge, absorbing new ideas. And one way of absorbing ideas was through other people. And we are very lucky here because we get people from all over the world, people that speak different languages. And for me, it was an opportunity to learn English, German, Danish. And why? Because I felt that that was the way to get connected to people and understand the culture. So, as you all know, we are actually very lucky because the Spanish system is such that you can get almost a free education, where in other countries people have to pay thousands of dollars to get a degree. We can almost get an MD or any degree almost for free. And on top of that, we get 3 months of vacation. So during the summers, I felt that it would be a great opportunity to go out and explore the world. So I used to get the Interrail, which was a ticket that allowed you to travel around Europe for free. And I used to go and meet these people that I meet here in the Canary Islands, the tourists that, you know, once in a while will come here, and I felt related to them. And I remember one summer, I was in Denmark, cold, but the summers are nice. And I was in my last year of molecular biology studies. And I thought to myself, you know what, I love being here, and I think it would be interesting to learn something more than the theory that, you know, they teach us in school, in the university, because that was something that it was perhaps missing here. So, you know, like a good Canarian boy, I went to the university, huge building, and I look and it's like, well, how am I going to do this? So I went inside, look, oh, there is an open door. Knock, knock. Hello, I'm Manuel, I'm from the Canary Islands, and I would like to work here. So what do you think the people will say? You're who? So at first, it was like, well, you know, we don't know who you are, but, you know, if you want to look around, why not? So I spent a week, and then through other connections, for a lady actually that worked in the Spanish embassy, who is from Tenerife, Manuel Betancourt, she told me, you know, there is another Spanish guy from the Canary Islands that is also at the university. So I'm like, really? Okay. So I went back to the university that day and went to the lady in the main door. It's like, excuse me, I'm looking for a guy from the Canary Islands. She looked at me like, who are you? What are you looking for? Anyway, I see that there is a Spanish guy in that lab. So I went to that building where the name neurophysiologist lab. I was like, wow, what is that? Must something to do with the brain. So I get into the office, see this gentleman. His name was Ivan Divac. And I say, hi, I'm Manuel from the Canary Islands. And I hear that you have someone from the Canary Islands here too. Say, oh, really? You're from the Canary Islands? That's a coincidence. So yeah, you know, there is a collaborator of mine that comes here every once in a while. He's a really nice guy. Why don't we give him a call? So you remember the old days? 3, 4. Hi, Jose, there is a guy here from the Canary Islands, and, you know, he just wanted to talk to you. Well, Jose happens to be Jose Regidor, that probably many of you know, who is the rector of Gran Canarias University. And Jose, we started talking, it's like, look, I'm here, I want to learn. I feel like, this is like an opportunity that I shouldn't waste. And he's like, well, yeah, sure. Why don't you, start working in the brain with DBAG? Why don't you study how the brain is connected? And years ago, this was a novel technology. It was a new way of looking at the circuitries of the brain. So 2 months went by. I was like, wow, this is really exciting. I'm studying the latest things in the brain. And when I came back to the Canary Islands, Jose told me, why don't you go back and do your PhD? I said, sure, and continue working in the brain. So I finished my molecular biology studies and went back to Denmark, cold, oh God, and continued to study the brain from different angles. At that time, the Nobel Prize in nitric oxide was given, and we thought, you know what, it would be interesting to see what nitric oxide does to the brain. So we did some experiments, and we discovered how nitric oxide was related to stress, depression. And after that, I decided that I wanted to expand, and I went to another lab to work with Morten Muller, one of the greatest neuroanatomists on the world. And he studies the pineal gland, that organ that is related to circadian rhythms. So we started working, and we started to collaborate with other people, and we identified some molecules that were modulating the circadian rhythms in the brain. I remember this because he will be back in the story I'm going to tell you. Morten told me one day, Manuel, if you want to be something in science, you ought to go to the United States. I say, well, that's a little bit far, but hey, if you think that that's a way to explore science, I will do it. So I went to a meeting, the Society for Neuroscience meeting, and applied for some jobs. And the last day of the Society for Neuroscience, I have this interview with a gentleman called Stanley Watson. Stanley, a nice guy with a beer, comes, Manuel, let's go to the bar, sit down, and let me tell you about what we do. So Stan, wonderful man, bright like hell, start telling me about, the stars have a lot to do with the brain. You can look at the stars with or the brain with a microscope, and you can look at the stars with a telescope, and they're all related. So he talked for an hour, and without saying anything, he said, when do you want to come? I suggest that you don't come until March because Michigan is very cold. So I said, well, after being in Denmark, nothing is as cold. So I took my suitcases, I arrived to Detroit, and in the middle of the winter, March, they forgot to pick me up. I thought I spoke some English, but when I asked people, I need to go to Ann Arbor, it's like, what? Anyway, here I am in the middle of America, and I felt like, oh my God, what I have done to my life. It was the best 5 years of my life doing science. I managed to collaborate with people that were extremely bright, brighter than me many, many times. It was about how to see the brain from the anatomy to the clinic, how you can get new ideas and explore them. Stan is one of these people that it will give you everything to try to achieve that goal. And I was lucky enough he was married to Huda Kill, which is also one of the brightest people I have ever met. If you ever want to see a really, really good presentation, other than Luz, you should listen to her. Very motivating. So over these 5 years, we studied the role of nitric oxide in the brain, in stress and depression. We collaborate with these different groups all over the United States, with people in Cornell, with people in Stanford. And the people who were funding us was a very wealthy family from Chicago, the Priskers. And they did a small experiment. How many of you know scientists here? Raise your hands. Okay. For those of you who don't know, scientists are very peculiar. They like to do their own thing, and they don't like to always collaborate with others. So the family did the experiment of having people from different areas to collaborate and see if they could work together. That experiment lasted 5 years. After those 5 years, they decided that they wanted to put money into this group to have a better understanding of the brain, which is, as you know, very complex, but also to try to find new therapies and diagnostics for depression, bipolar, and schizophrenia. So after 5 years in Michigan, I told Stan, I love working for you, but this is way too cold. I'm from the Canary Islands. I need to go somewhere warm. So he said, well, you know what? We're starting this new project. He's collaborating in between the same people, and we are opening something in San Francisco. It's like, can I apply for it? So I was lucky enough to get the position, and that was now 13 years ago. What started with a brain bank, so people who die from the disease over the years. We identify novel targets, the fibroblast growth factors being one of them. And you remember that collaboration I had back in Denmark, looking at a peptide? So it happens that that peptide also is a target for this fibroblast growth factor. So after 13 years of serendipity, you have to be lucky. I feel like I'm a lucky guy. We are now considering moving this novel target, novel drug, into the clinic for the treatment of 50% of the population who doesn't respond to the current therapies for depression. For me, that's the dream come true. It's the ability of getting something that started from scratch all the way to the clinic. So the Priska family is a very smart family, obviously, and they thought, well, the best way to try to commercialize an idea is to be surrounded by entrepreneurs, by people who have done it before. So they put my office inside of a firm called Bay City Capital. Bay City Capital is a venture capital firm. What this means is a company that invests money in innovation. So over these 13 years, we have been very lucky because I was given the task, together with some of my colleagues, to start new companies. Companies based, for instance, in the idea that you can regulate neurogenesis, the cells that you have in the brain that we all thought that you're born and they stay the same. Actually, there are cells that are regenerated, that you can modulate, and you can treat psychiatric disorders. You remember I told you that I was working in the pineal gland? This is related to circadian rhythms. So I was lucky enough that my boss told us, why don't you go out and figure out what is the next innovation that you think is going to make a change in the world? Many of you have traveled around the world, and you know what is jet lag. When you come back from a trip or when you go somewhere, you feel like you're dizzy, you know, you're waking up early or waking up late. So, and this is also related to psychiatric disorders, to metabolic disorders. So we decided to identify those key people, what we call key opinion leaders, KOLs, all over the globe, and to bring them in order to identify technologies that can modulate the brain, the circadian rhythms, for the treatment of not only brain disorders, but also metabolic disorders. I feel I'm really lucky because those kind of experiences, you can only do it when you are surrounded by people who are smarter than you. And me being a sponge is like, wow, I'm really learning something today. I'm going to be learning something tomorrow. Some of the other investments that we have done relates to technologies that everybody have here about sequencing and the next generation sequencing. And we saw a company that brought together the circuits of being in the Silicon Valley, the microchips, together with molecular biology. That company is called, or was called, Ion Torrent. It was a really interesting path to see how what is the next generation of sequencing is going to transform everybody that is here, and how that's going to be applied to cancer, how it's going to be applied to psychiatric disorders, how it's going to apply to all kind of disorders. We happened to sell that company for $750 million a year after. So now, after all these years, where I have been traveling around, getting to know different cultures, having a little bit of understanding, working with people, I think what is really important is working with people that know more than you and that you feel passion to work with. Huda Kiel, Stanley Watson, Morten Muller, Alan Schasberg, Biff Bunny, Ted Jones, Rick Myers. These are people that if you go out and look at Google are the top of genetics, genomics, psychiatry, molecular biology, neurosciences. I feel very lucky. But you know what? The same way you can be, because we come from the Canary Islands. This is a place where Columbus left to explore new opportunities, to explore innovation. And here I am back, looking at opportunities in the Canary Islands, which many of you should know is one of those centers of excellence in creating new opportunities. The ability of having entrepreneurs and people that can bring those technologies into the next stage is something that excites me. And I hope that through this presentation you feel that at some point you feel excited enough to start the same trip, the same journey through your brain. Thank you.